This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so the idea of this entire series is to make sure that we align ourselves to the practical conditions on the ground. People cannot attend seminars, people cannot meet in large groups. So we are trying to do this. Society of Financial Services is trying to do a seminar. We are using GoToMeeting, so it's not easy for people to learn how to use because we are not using live Facebook. So without further ado, Mr. Leong, can you share a bit about your experience in encountering fraud, whether you have yourself been frauded before, and then we'll go into allowing you to speak about fraudulent investments and how to prevent them.
I was a money radio show talk show host for about 3+ years in the past, and a lot of people call, regarding scams. And of course, you can see now that uh, every year there are so many scams, and they seem to be increasing.
Have you yourself encountered fraud? As in, have you been frauded before?
Fortunately, not, but let me share a personal experience with you. I think about 20 years ago, we had Sunshine Empire fraud, which arguably was one of the largest in Singapore, more than $160 million. So at that time, people were telling me, and I brought my friend who was a journalist with the newspaper to go and visit the office, and then they ran the story.
Okay, so recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, we see a lot of fraud cases that begin to get us worried. From FX courses that guarantee profits, from guaranteed MLM schemes. What are some core attributes of fraud that you would share in this podcast?
Well, it seems that a lot of the scams and fraud are repeated. In other words, the modus operandi is almost similar. So the scammers are actually using the same or similar tactics over and over again. So I think it's a question of matter of awareness. If people are aware of what happened, how it happened, then when they see something similar, they will need to be more cautious.
Okay, so let's talk about three topics now. First, get rich quick schemes, MLM, and eventually people who tell you that they guarantee investments. Can you talk us through your ideas of get rich quick courses?
Um, Actually, I think let me touch about get rich quick courses a little later, because apparently of late, it seems that the most prevalent scams going around are a lot of this guaranteed forex profit scam. So, for example, they will sign an agreement for you to borrow money from you like a loan, and then they pay you like 3% interest per month, and they tell you that is the guaranteed return on the forex trading. Of course, at the end of the day, it turned out that that was not the case. It's actually a Ponzi scheme. Uh,
Okay, what are your thoughts about? I mean, the key point about this podcast is such that the users can self-help. They can look at your experience, they can use your experience and your stories to help themselves. You talked about an FX scheme like that. How would we know? Because sometimes it's too good to be true, right?
well, actually, I think the problem is when you talk to people who have lost money, the typical story is like this, they have a very close friend who put money with this 3% a month guaranteed forex trading scheme, and the friend has been collecting this 3% for like 1.5 years. So they say, oh, then it has to be true, right? So they go in, maybe they put a smaller amount. Then when they start getting their 3% every month, they get a bit more greedy and they put a larger amount.
So you mean for early starters, they really may get 3% a month or whatever they promise?
Yes, I mean, I've come across cases where people actually got their 3% for like 1.5 years, I take the
So in
case
that,
of let's look at the case of what is arguably the biggest and most famous Ponzi scheme in the history of the world, and that is Bernie Madoff case in the US. His Ponzi scheme was going on for decades.
so what are people supposed to do when they face with very attractive investment schemes, and central banks like MAS can say there's no such thing as guarantee, but by word of mouth or by experience, others do receive guaranteed payment. So how do they identify scams?
Well, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And then I think before you invest in anything, you have to ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? And if something goes wrong, what recourse is available to you? In most of the cases, by the time things turn sour, the fraudster would have disappeared. So you can't even you make a police report, the person may have disappeared, or there may be no money left, in the scheme.
So if we talk about something nearer to Singapore's heart about fintech and scams, ICOs, you invested in ICOs. A lot of ICOs are considered to have scammy attributes. What are some things you want to say about that in this podcast?
Now, of course, with all the hype about cryptocurrency, in my opinion, this is something that is here to stay, right? And you have even people like Facebook announcing they're going to come up with Libra, and therefore the thing is probably difficult going into the future for people to avoid ICOs or digital currency or cryptocurrencies altogether, right? So what they need to look out for is what are the attributes that you need to look at to see whether that is real or a scam, a scheme that's going on.
So far you've talked about it being too good to be true. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. You also talked about risk. How much can you afford to lose? Say today we have got a few examples quoted in this podcast. We talked about Bernie Madoff, Sunshine Empire. We also talk about the FX scheme. Are there particular brands, are there particular courses that you would like to shout out now so we can warn people?
Okay, if you look back at should I say, the history of scams in Singapore, particularly for so-called very expensive FX courses that teach you, sure make money, they are not so predominant nowadays because I think there have been so many of them that most people are aware of it, and therefore, it is not such a serious problem today. If you look at maybe 5 years, 10 years ago, there were a lot of people, advertising, courses that will guarantee to help you make money, particularly in forex. But now you hardly see them anymore.
Okay, that's awkward. Awkward question from me. We know that you will never disclose any particular names. Any hints of any such recently? Do you want to give us any hints for this podcast?
So I just came across, like I described earlier, that forex scheme. They, instead of taking your money, they give you agreement to say that they are borrowing money from you like a loan. You get 3% interest a month, and that money is supposed to be generated on guaranteed basis from forex trading. But as it turned out, actually, the person wasn't even doing any forex trading. It's most likely a Ponzi scheme.
Okay. So what do you think people can do when they want to ask questions about scam? Specifically, they are now, for example, faced with a good investing opportunity. They want to uh, have a second and third opinion. If they write to the MAS will not reply. Should they write to MP or should they check with whoever?
So I think the first thing they can do, right, is to Google that scheme and the word scam or review to see whether anybody is talking about this scheme in the past. But the problem with this approach is that if it's a brand new scheme just launched or something, you probably won't find anybody saying anything bad or even good about it. MAS has an investor alert list where they list those companies where they tell you to be wary of. So you also check that one. But the problem here, of course, is many of these scammers, they just start a different name, and it may take some time before that name gets picked up again.
You've been a bankruptcy counselor at IPTO for quite a few years. Anybody got into bankruptcy mode because they were scammed, either by a fintech, forex, finance scam, or whether it's a general business scam?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, you have people who lose thousands in a scam. I've seen people who have lost millions in a scam as well.
So let's talk about the attractiveness of a scam. When people know it's too good to be true, people inherently will still try to get attracted and justify their means to get into it. What are some reasons why would people emotionally be attached to scams, even though scams are not hard to identify? You said yourself, it's just if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Well, I've come across many cases where the person who introduced the so-called scam scheme was a very close family member or very close friend. So if you trust your family member, you trust your friend, and then you probably trust what they are asking you to invest in.
Should they ask their financial advisors?
Yeah, I mean, you should Google the internet, ask around, ask I mean, the more information you gather, the better it is for you to make a decision. Now, we are not saying that every investment scheme, every cryptocurrency is always a scam. That's not the case. But let's look at cryptocurrencies, of course. Some things you can look at will be like, is it regulated? In which jurisdictions are it regulated? Is it in the better jurisdictions, the more established financial centers? Does the currency has a utility? Is it something that is in demand because they can use it, or is it purely for speculation? So it can be quite, should I say, complicated. But if you talk about cryptocurrencies, because there are so many of them, there are so many different attributes that if you analyze it, you probably come up with in fact, you go on the internet, there are all kinds of thousands of people analyzing cryptocurrencies, which is better, which is not so good, which is better now, and so on.
Which government organization can people count on to go to uncover scams or to ask questions about scam?
I think at the moment, the only practical one is the MAS investor alert list, where, as I understand, they list the names of the companies they ask you to be beware of. Other than that, I'm not aware of any official, body or people or hotline or anything that you can go to ask. But of course, you watch the TV now, it said they are telling you there are so many scams, and they ask you to go to, I think it's scamalert.sg or something, But most of these are the smaller scams, like buying fake things on the internet, or fake concert tickets, or uh, calling you to give your money to a friend and all that.
Okay, we talked about forex courses, finance courses. Next, we want to talk about misrepresentation and scams arising, even if the product is official and good and regulated. Bad financial advisory, for example, people who says that ETF, I can guarantee you it's always 7%. How do we identify between good financial advice and bad financial advice that in itself can be defined as scams?
Well, in the first place, uh, there are no guarantees in investing. Okay, you take the example of say the high flux case. Yeah, you are perpetual securities, you get your coupon. You're a note holder, you get a coupon. But at the end of the day, when the company fails, so there's no such thing as a ironclad guarantee in investing. And of course, you must realize the higher the return that is well offered or projected to you, probably the higher you put the risk.
We talked about high flux. Some investors say that they were scammed to the extent that numbers, financial statements did not match up to what appears as a shock when eventually it was in a credit event. What are your thoughts about those things?
Well, it's a very complicated case. A lot of people have been talking about it. SIAS and various bodies, experts, academics, commentators. Of course, from your question, a lot of the investors will say, "Hey, I must have been scammed, right?" But you see, this is was listed on the stock exchange. All the issues were done in accordance with the rules and regulations. So perhaps the issue is that from the investor's perspective, they may be asking what are some of the information that may have not been disclosed to them, which may have affected how the decision whether they wanted to invest in the first place. For example, if you look at the perpetual securities, arguably you may say, oh, when they were going to offer the perpetual securities, surely a cash flow projection must have been done. What do the cash flow projections show? And when it was issued, did the issuer do an internal analyst report on the issue? So these are some of the information that, well, depending on how the high flux situation proceeds, may come up in the future, I think.
Okay, thank you. Last question. For a victim of a fraud, say I invested 2K into a trading course, and that during that trading course, it was more of an emotional, it was more a psychological cost. I want to get back refunds. Can I write to my MP? Can I do one-to-one with MPs to get back the money? You were heavily involved in the Potong Pasir MP meet MP session. So do those avenues work? The question, the line of thought here is, how do we help people get back their money?
Okay, I think to be pragmatic, right? As I mentioned, I was a radio talk show host. See, a lot of people who run such courses, they're very wary of bad reviews or bad news. So if you're one of the early ones who go to them and say, I'm very unhappy, they may actually refund some of your money, because by the time a lot of people talk about it, right, it's probably too late. I'm not saying you should not go and complain, right? But then from a practical standpoint, I've seen from my experience that the early ones who manage to, should I say, negotiate and ask for a refund, and they may get it, because most of these people, they know once the news get out, their golden goose that's laying the eggs will disappear.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Leong, for your time for this short podcast. Can you walk us through any other advice, any other ideas you have on your mind on the topic regarding scam, how to avoid it, how to identify it, apart from what I summarized as, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Go early to the scam company and ask for feedback, ask for your refund, saying that if you don't, I'll put you on press. What are some other practical feedback you have, and what are thoughts you have on this topic of scam?
One suggestion I have is, when in doubt, ask. Ask around, or ask on the internet or on the chat. Some very often people will come and tell you, oh, this one has some issue or maybe some problem. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Leong, for your time. We will put this up shortly on internet, so members of the general public who can join us today can also hear it. I'm Alex, and we are from the Society of Financial Service Professionals. Thank you.
Thank you.